Welcome back to the county seat. If you're just joining us, we are covering the issue of centrally assessed taxes. That's what our first story was about, what they are, how they work. But that's just the tip of the centrally assessed tax iceberg. For you see, centrally assessed taxes are complex documents, and as you go through the process of establishing them, there are lots of questions and lots of areas that they can be challenged. The appeal process is complex as well, and it has impacts on the counties beyond just the disputed amount of what they need to pay. Here, continuing that story, is Terry Wood.
As Utahns, we all pay property taxes, one way or another, even if we don't own land. What do you do if you don't agree with your property tax assessment, though? Well, you have the right to appeal, and so do big businesses that pay centrally assessed taxes. But appealing can be very costly, and it can take a long time. You work your way through the court system, and you can eventually end up here at the Utah Supreme Court.
2 months after a company files its annual report with the State Tax Commission, the Commission will issue its determination of the company's value. Then the business has 30 days to appeal. And disagreement is almost as inevitable as taxes.
Sometimes we do appeal valuations based on what we think is fair and prudent for customers. And the times that we have appealed those valuations, we have prevailed.
Counties can also object, either individually or as a group. And they often do because their budgets depend on those centrally assessed tax revenues.
They are such a big, in general terms, they're a big part of our overall value. And as you look at that value and how it affects the local people and the operating perspective of the county, it has a large impact on the ability of the county to continually fund or to meet the obligations that they have.
After a State Tax Commission board hears the arguments and makes a ruling, the matter can be taken even further, to court. First district, then, if necessary, the state Supreme Court.
I feel sorry for many of the judges who have to decide these complex cases because few of these issues become black and white.
Sometimes when they file an appeal, those appeals are not able to be resolved promptly. In some circumstances, they will carry over for 1, 2, or more years.
And that is exactly what happened after a series of appeals by Rocky Mountain Power. In 2006, the company sold for more than $9 billion, whereas its tax valuation was just short of $3 billion. The power company's tax assessment was based on physical property. The sale was based on many other factors, like its revenues and growth projections.
There are lots of other items that come into the sale of a company as opposed to its property. And if the tax is intended to tax the real property that we use to serve customers' electricity, it should be based on the physical property.
As these battles rage, critics contend big business almost always has an unfair advantage. You've heard the cynical interpretation of the golden rule, he who owns the gold sets the rules? Well, these critics say businesses often prevail with high-powered attorneys, lobbyists, political contributions, and public relations experts. In many other legal cases, there comes a point when counties will just cut their losses.
A lot of the counties just kind of felt like, what's the point? Or do we really get anywhere with it? And so at that point, a lot of those appeals were just settled.
Taxpayers are a lot of times painting a very, poor picture of their, business enterprise and how they're, if they're even going to be in business in a few years, and everything's really bad and not going too well for them. And then, 2 years later, they'll have a sale that's, well over what they were, their appraisers were coming in and valuing the exact same property as.
And that's the big question here, the fair share. So what do you do if you think you're not getting a fair deal? Or if you don't like the way the taxes are being dispersed? Everyone involved has the right to appeal personal property taxes, but it is costly. Takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And it has an effect on all the rest of us. How? We'll discuss that coming up in the county seat. I'm Terry Wood.
Thank you, Terry, for that report. We have spent the entire half hour so far covering this complex issue of centrally assessed taxes, and it is a complex issue. By now, you should have a fairly good understanding of what it is and how it works and some of its problems. For the balance of the show, we are going to turn our attention to looking at possible solutions. To help us with that, we have our two guests today, Larry Walters, who is a professor at the George Romney Institute of Public Management, Brigham Young University. Thank you for joining us. And Mark Altum, who is the Davis County Treasurer, and they will be joining us for a discussion on where we might go from here to solve the problem. Stay with us. We'll be back in just a minute with the county seat.
In order for there to be adventure, there must first be a land that offers it. In order for there to be discovery, there must first be something undiscovered. It's time you discovered northeastern Utah's dinosaur lands, the trails, water, beauty, and history that have been 65 million years in the making. Take your journey to a destination where adventure is only limited by your imagination. Join us in Uinta County, Undiscovered Utah. Almost 45% of the oil produced in Utah, 7.8 million barrels, comes from Duchesne County. That oil feeds our state economy, provides job growth, and supports local business. Here in Duchesne County, we're working to make Utah an economic, cultural, and technological leader. Whether you're here for business or pleasure, Duchesne County will welcome you with open arms and invite you to explore all the beauty of the Uinta Mountains. Duchesne County, close enough for business, far enough to get away.
What do you picture when you hear Rich County, Utah? Winter adventure? Snowmobile action? Pristine skiing? Spectacular solitude? Well, if that isn't what first came to mind, then you just don't know Rich County. Snowmobiling Monte Cristo, ice fishing Bear Lake, skiing the backcountry. Come and find out what you never knew you were missing. Rich County, Utah.